It's the story of a utopia that goes against the grain of our era. On a planet obsessed with the idea of erecting boundaries, we take you to discover a world where knocking them down actually offers protection of nature and of man, and even draws nations together. All thanks to special parks devised to transcend borders, peace parks.
Peace parks is more than animals and wildlife. Peace parks is also about living in harmony with people.
The first Transfrontier Park was created here in 1932, between Canada and the United States, around Waterton Glacier, in celebration of the two countries' friendship.
Peace Park is essentially an environmental conservation area which can be used as a place for building trust and harmony.
This simple yet visionary idea has spread to every continent. In upcoming years, over 227 border zones could become peace parks, ranging in size from a few hectares to immense natural reserves. 60 have already been created, 5 in America, 2 in Asia, 4 in Europe, and more than half in Africa. In a land fractured by artificially drawn colonial borders dating from the 19th century, these transfrontier parks do more than simply reunite ecosystems and offer sanctuary for wildlife. Concretely speaking, they foster the economic development of their border nations, thanks to the ecotourism boom. A profitable ecology that pushes nations to cooperate and sometimes overcome former conflicts.
I think the main point about peace parks to keep in mind is that they are representative of the role the environment can play in bringing human communities together.
This utopia in action, on which the future of Africa and perhaps even the world rides, was one of Nelson Mandela's final dreams.
It is important if various countries across boundaries work together, that unites those countries, and the boundaries become something unimportant.
The desire to heal Africa through peace parks was born in these valleys of the Cape on the tip of South Africa. We owe it to the determination of an ecologist patron who managed to bring Nelson Mandela on board for the cause, Anton Rupert.
Dr. Anton Rupert was good friends with President Nelson Mandela. And even shortly after his release, they had their first meeting. When Dr. Rupert told him about the idea and about the concept, President Mandela was immediately supportive.
Together, they created a Peace Parks Foundation that was inaugurated in 1997.
At the dawn of a new Africa,
around the table, Anton Rupert and his two ambassadors, Prince Bernhard of the Netherlands and the President of South Africa.
Anton Rupert and Prince Bernhard have sent me to various places, and I've put aside everything because it is important.
In this footage from 2001, President Mandela opens the fence separating South Africa from Mozambique to create a transfrontier park connecting the two countries. Great Limpopo Transfrontier Park, named after the river flowing through Zimbabwe, Mozambique, and South Africa. It took 10 years of political negotiations and the end of apartheid to overcome this international border separating two countries long ravaged by war. 20 years earlier, from 1976 to 1992, rebels armed by South Africa's apartheid regime fought the communist government of Mozambique that backed Mandela's ANC. A wound this peace park managed to heal.
If you think about it, the Great Limpopo Transfrontier Park, which was created between Mozambique and South Africa, were both in an apartheid struggle for years, and the other country was in a civil war for almost 20 years. And those two countries could set aside those really big obstacles and go one step further to say, here's an international boundary and a fence between ourselves, and we agree and we take it down, which is actually, if you think about it, very progressive and very visionary, even 10, 15 years ago.
Underlying this vision born by Anton Rupert and his foundation was an ecological drive, expanding the surface area of the largest game reserve in South Africa, Kruger National Park. Its fences were built in 1961 to protect wildlife from extinction. Since then, several gates have been built to allow tourists to enter. Inside, the park spans 20,000 square kilometers of preserved savanna filled with protected species. These elephants can come and go as they please. One may admire them from one of the rare roads, occasionally from quite close. The only condition, visitors must remain safely inside their cars. There are only a few areas within the thousands of hectares where visitors are allowed out of their cars to observe the wildlife and scenery. These birds have no trouble crossing the park's fences. But this isn't the case for herds of mammals. Zebras suffer when electric fences prevent them from following their ancestral migratory path.
In wildlife, you need vast open areas for big game to operate in. Fencing areas is just counterproductive to big game reserves, which you require for tourism. You can't not show people lion, elephant, cheetah, wild dogs. If you have fences, these animals won't exist because you'll be fencing them off from migratory behavior and bigger areas. Therefore, it's critically important that to create bigger areas, fences obviously have to come down.
This was the thinking, enlarging the area required for the animals, that led the Peace Parks Foundation to focus on uniting the ecosystems of South Africa and Mozambique. And here is what the border post inside the park looks like today. The Giriondo border post, a simple formality that allows one to easily pass from Kruger to Great Limpopo, from South Africa to Mozambique. Besides reinforcing ties between the two nations, the creation of a park on the Mozambique side made it possible to transform this former hunting concession, traumatized by years of war, into a protected reserve. This forest ranger walks along a path that was laid with mines by his own battalion back when he was a soldier in the Mozambique army.
This is the road right here. Back during the war, this whole area was mined. The mines here protected all the way to that road. We laid mines against the enemy, and the enemy against us. That's why the site was abandoned. But now the mines have been entirely cleared, and we can pass through here once again.
Now the paths are safe. Here is one of the rare battle scenes on offer in the park today. Two male nyalas naturally slowing down their metabolism to size each other up before a fight.
My life used to be very different from the way it is today. Back then, you had to cultivate a plot of land in order to eat. You couldn't earn money to buy food. Ever since I was hired by the park, my life has completely changed. Nothing is the way it was before.
Limpopo National Park has brought many positive developments with it. It has greatly contributed to improving the region. This is evident in the villages surrounding the park. Their inhabitants have a much higher standard of living, thanks to the park and tourism.
Anthony Alexander also works for the Great Limpopo Transfrontier Park. But he is South African. He was appointed by the Peace Parks Foundation to develop the project. Every day he endeavors to encourage wildlife, in particular elephants, to return to this part of the park, despite the years of hunting and mines.
Elephants live to 70 odd years, and they've got an incredible memory. So 70 years ago they were quite regular in Mozambique, and then of course the war came in the 70s and 80s, and they all moved to safety in South Africa. So it was a very gradual process of them coming back into Mozambique. It was initially the translocation, and an elephant are quite intelligent. They can feel and sense where the mines are, and they're very wary of human impact as well. And with time, we're seeing more and more come over. They realize that it's safe.
To develop the park, over 4,000 animals, including numerous elephants and zebras, were moved from South Africa to Mozambique, where they are now free to thrive and reproduce.
It's magical. I mean, 5-6 years ago, you wouldn't have seen this. Beautiful water, beautiful vegetation, beautiful zebras, really special. It's a long process. It's a slow process to get the wildlife numbers up. But its proximity to Kruger National Park is key. I mean, Kruger gets over 1 million visitors. If we can get 100,000 or 200,000 of those visitors, the park will be financially self-sustainable, and that's ultimately what we're looking towards.
Ecotourism is 90% tourists from overseas destinations. And these are the people that are driving the initiatives relating to wildlife tourism. And with that, obviously, employment much needed and foreign currency earning.
And Africa, it's not an industrialized continent at all. There's not a lot of manufacturing taking place. But there's incredible landscapes and incredible wildlife. So if for every 8 visitors to Africa, you create 1 job.
Peace parks have the potential to augment economic activity. And so we should not just think of them as naive ideas, utopian ideas, but as potential opportunities for economic development and growth in border regions.
For the time being, there are very few lodges open on the Mozambican side. Take this rustic hotel, for example, Mashampane. The only guests are a handful of South Africans in the know, or else foreign tourists looking for a stopover point on the way from Kruger Park to the beaches in Mozambique. To attract more visitors, there needs to be an increase in wildlife. Roads need to be opened up and the infrastructure developed. All of this implies intensive cooperation between South Africans and Mozambicans.
So I'd just like to discuss the Shingwedzi Cliffs Trail.
Back in the days of apartheid, something like this was unthinkable. Anthony, the South African, works under the orders of Antonio, the Mozambican.
How we're going to get across the border, how we're going to operate the trail.
And just to remind you to take with you the tourism manager, just for him to be exposed into this environment.
With the creation of Limpopo National Park, several initiatives were undertaken to make the zone accessible, because the goal is to allow visitors to come and see the great potential this region has.
I think that's one of the beauties of the Peace Parks concept, is it enables people to move across boundaries, to set aside those differences and to really see how they can look at optimizing the shared natural resources for the benefit of all the partners. It's not your elephant or my elephant or your bird or my bird, it's ours. Recognizing that, to then put in place mechanisms to help manage and protect those shared resources.
But one danger lurks amid all these efforts: poaching. Local hunters, paid by traffickers, have already killed a few rhinoceroses in the Mozambican park to sell their horns.
So this is more than likely a poacher's fire. You can see the way they've burnt the tips of the wood. Not too much coals. Poaching, in particular rhino poaching, and more so elephant poaching, is perhaps the biggest threat to the Great Limpopo Transfrontier Park.
If the rhinoceroses die, the park could die too for lack of visitors. This threat is yet another reason encouraging South Africans and Mozambicans to join forces and stand guard against a bane that plagues the entire region. For the proponents of peace parks, the solution lies not in building higher and higher fences to protect the territory, but in fostering co-development and creating jobs through ecotourism. This is still the best way to discourage poachers and limit illegal immigration.
There's a lot of pressure on the GLTP to put fences up because there's a belief that it stops poachers, but the reality is a fence doesn't stop a person, a fence can only stop wildlife. This fence can be jumped over quite quickly. If you look at the border between USA and Mexico, the most technologically advanced fence, it doesn't stop people. And I think the best method is to make sure that there's economic prosperity on both sides of the border, and one can do that through tourism, which is the most suitable land use for this area. And by doing that, one doesn't need fences anymore.
My dream, wouldn't it be wonderful if from the sea of Mozambique to the Drakensberg Mountains, there are no fences. I mean, in an international, and I think that was one of Dr. Rupert's aims and objectives through peace parks. Peace parks was to form smaller areas, but with the idea of growing them greater and greater.
Today, there are over 33 of these identified peace parks in Africa. In southern Africa, there's 18, jointly cover an area of over 1 million square kilometers, which is a significant expanse of land. I mean, that is equivalent to the size of France and Germany combined. In fact, it's a little bit bigger than that.
Certainly the Peace Parks Foundation and their work in Southern Africa makes a very cogent economic case for peace parks, and they have used it quite admirably as a means of attracting tourism, particularly in transboundary areas. So there is clearly an economic case to be made for peace parks, and not just a utopian, naive idea.
The next leg of this journey takes us to South America, to La Amistad International Park, a friendship park located between Panama and Costa Rica.
This friendship park, in keeping with its name, has fostered friendship for several years between Panama and Costa Rica. There is no border within the park. It is a shared territory.
Costa Rica and Panama have never fought each other, and for good reason. There are no more armies on either side of the border, a decision that was taken in a highly particular context.
The Latin American Republic of Panama.
In December 1989, the United States invaded Panama to fight a dictator suspected of arming the communist regime of Nicaragua, General Noriega. The operation made it possible for his opponent, Guillermo Andara, to be elected. Yet no South American country would recognize Andara, except for Costa Rica.
My mandate was coming to an end in May 1990, and I told President Andara, I want to recognize your government, and I want to be the first to do so because we are neighbors. But for this you must pay a price. And that price is the abolition of Panama's army, which has done nothing but harm Panama with its coup, as was the case for Haiti and countless other Latin American countries and throughout the world.
Panama agreed to follow in the footsteps of Costa Rica, which had abolished its own army back in 1948, with a new constitution designed to avoid future coups.
In the words of François Mitterrand, Costa Rica is the only country in the world to declare peace on the international community. Having no army has always been a calculated risk. The money that would have been used to purchase weapons was invested in education and health instead. The entire population is covered, as in wealthy countries, and we have the highest literacy rate of any developing country.
La Amistad Park was born before the demilitarization in 1982 to protect 400,000 hectares of tropical forest, which has an extraordinary geography. Classified as a World Heritage Site by UNESCO, the park is home to rare species of birds and insects, some of which have just been discovered.
The park is a unique place where we've identified several endemic species. This year alone, so far, science has discovered 3 new species, and we hope to be able to discover more in the future.
Roger Gonzalez is a biologist. Every morning he walks the trails that have been made available for rare visitors, often researchers who come to study the nature.
This red flower comes from a tree called boro. The red flowers are highly attractive for several species, notably the birds that come to seek its nectar.
del néctar de las flores.
Costa Rica boasts 20,000 varieties of butterflies and 400 types of birds, including these magically colorful hummingbirds. It is also home to many mammals which are mainly seen with the help of infrared cameras installed on the trees. Like this tapir, or this endangered jaguar, whose habitat has been preserved by the park.
These clearings correspond to areas that were deforested long before the forest was declared a national park. All the trees that were cut went to the lumber industry. Ever since the park has been protected, we've seen a natural regeneration. But some invasive plant species are causing problems for this regeneration. These plants cover most of the vegetation. Luckily, we can count on these insects. They feed on this plant that slows the regeneration of these clearings. It's a very beneficial biological controller.
The main interest of La Amistad National Park is that it has slowed the predicted deforestation, thanks to cooperation between forest rangers in Panama and Costa Rica.
We select certain areas within the park on both the Costa Rican and the Panamanian sides. And we patrol 5, 6, or even 7 days in strategic spots where we know there are hunters, illegal crops, or clearings.
These patrols have their limits. In Panama, crops continue to advance and nibble away at the forest. Sometimes to the detriment of the Indians, who have always lived there, such as the Nassau, whose life on the river is threatened by the construction of a dam that will bring electricity to the region.
For the Nassau, the river is many things. It's everything. It's their highway, their form of transportation. They have no roads between their 12 communities. It's their source of food. It's where they bathe, laundry, everything. And so the risk is if they should lose that river from hydroelectric development, then they lose their way of life.
The only hope for the Nassau and the forest is the fact that UNESCO is worried about the proximity of the dam to La Amistad Park, so much so that it has issued a warning to Panama.
UNESCO has said that should there be any further hydroelectric development in the park, according to plans that have been investigated, then they will lose World Heritage status.
This is what is so important about a peace park. Being able to put this forest and river under international surveillance, giving them an ecological value that puts the brakes on certain economic appetites. Unlike Panama, Costa Rica has banned construction and crops within the forest since the creation of the park. A decision that wasn't easy to get accepted.
Relations between the two countries were tense between 1982 and 1987 because of poaching and vandalism in the protected reserve. But little by little, thanks to joint action, the situation began to change, notably due to community management programs, scientific research, and environmental education, which are now coordinated with organized groups located in the buffer zone.
Panama and Costa Rica have led programs to encourage farmers living on the outskirts of the park to grow organic coffee, which fells fewer trees and requires less water. A message completely accepted by the new generations.
We've worked with several producers to get them to stop using agrochemicals, or at least the healthiest ones possible, environmentally friendly ones with green labels. The water in this zone comes from a spring 1.5 kilometers away, so we're working to protect that.
The park has helped protect critical habitat. And in more than actually protecting the habitat itself, it's also helping to create more of an awareness of the importance of biosphere reserves, especially among the young people.
In the Valley of Silence, we're in close contact with nature. In peaceful spots like this, it's almost like the forest belongs to us. The park doesn't belong to anyone, but we love it and protect it as if it were ours.
I think there's hope because there's a great pride in the ecology emerging, and there's a great pride in the fact that Panama is, along with Costa Rica, home to a World Heritage Site for the ecology.
Although climate change and border problems may lead to wars, it's also true that natural parks can bring friendship and peace and prevent conflict between neighboring countries.
The interest of a peace park is to push the envelope where it's least expected. Optimists dream of the Middle East. To imagine this, we must leave behind the images we're already familiar with. Jerusalem with its ancestral wall, separating the Jewish part from the Muslim part. This fence built at the foot of the wall to separate men from women who've come to pray. We must leave the famous wall separating Israeli settlements from the Palestinian territories. Get away from this rider observing the scars from an olive orchard overlooking Bethlehem. We must get off this stifling route Israeli settlers have forced upon themselves in fear of attacks and of their neighbors. We must travel 150 kilometers north of Jerusalem, above an islet where the Yarmouk meets the Jordan. That could give rise to a future peace park, the Jordan River Park. Its east bank is in Jordan, its west bank in Israel. The border between these two countries passes exactly down the middle of the river, which is guarded on the Israeli side by an electronic fence. What's surprising for this region is that civilians can open it to venture near the other bank, which is monitored by Jordanian watchtowers every 7 kilometers.
This place is quite special because this is maybe one of 2 places that you can come, open the gate, open the electronic fence and cross and to get inside and to get very close to the Jordan River. You cannot do it other place because all along the way down to the Dead Sea we have the electronic fence. The yellow gate was built by the Israeli army. And it protects us, but very easily we can let them know on the telephone that we have visitors all day and all night long. Many years ago, it was not possible to do this.
These tourists venture as close to the border as possible to admire these historically charged sites. Like this bridge, built by the Romans in the 2nd century AD. Or this ancient caravanserai, a stopover for Ottoman caravans and merchandise in the 14th century. Or else this train, bombarded in 1948 when 2 Arab armies from Iraq and Jordan attempted to invade the young Israeli nation. Stopped dead in its tracks. The train hasn't run since.
Everybody crossed here. Caravan with goods, troops, armies who usually build the bridge, trains. People could cross here and from side to side until 1948. Since 1948, nobody crossed here anymore. Maybe in the future.
It is with this hope that Nirit welcomes tourists and watches over this special place. She grew up in a nearby kibbutz, which looked after the site and restored these dormant sites with the help of Israel's Department of Antiquities. Located just opposite the park, the Kibbutz Gesher is a utopist community founded in 1939 in a spirit of sharing. Many families who live here have descended from immigrants that escaped pogroms and Nazi camps. Some fought against the Jordan army in 1948. They now make a living from farming, recycling, or tourism linked to the park.
I'm a 3rd generation on Kibbutz Gesher. Gesher means bridge. This is us. We are the bridge. So if you're looking forward, maybe this is the place to start all the cooperation, and we're looking forward for the next years this place to be open again.
In Jordan, we called that area Jisr al-Majama', which means the area of the many bridges. And when we are ready, when things are developed or well developed, we can make this joint cooperation and call it the Peace Park of North Jordan.
The dream of a joint park is the rallying point for the ecologists of eco-peace. It is what makes them work together to convince decision makers on either side of the border.
Nobody's really laughing at this point. They're listening, they're criticizing, they're wondering. When I say they, I mean the higher level governments, but everybody's listening. And that's a much better place to be than if they're laughing at us. So we've already made progress.
What makes this project achievable is that we are a regional organization. We are in Jordan, Palestine, and Israel. And it's one umbrella. So whatever I do in Jordan is the interest of the people in Israel and Palestine also.
I did come to Israel really with a dream, living in a community that was sharing ideals, sharing many things. Today it doesn't really work like that, but that's okay because there is still good things happening and there are still people that want those good things to happen.
This glimmer of hope sought by ecologists on both sides would not have been possible without a bit of political goodwill. It all began with a peace treaty signed in 1994 between Israel and Jordan, between Yitzhak Rabin and King Hussein.
This is peace.
C'est une paix dans la dignité, une paix dans la conviction. C'est notre cadeau à nos peuples et aux générations à venir.
The treaty made it possible to protect the land on either side of the Jordan River. That of the Gesher Gate, as well as other pieces of land located further down alongside the river. Like this island of peace, bordering on the ruins of a power plant, which has also ceased activity since 1948. Here too, visitors come with their families, sometimes for the sole pleasure of crossing military barriers, or to breathe the air of a fragile truce under the watchful eye of guards in Israel and Jordan, occasionally reflecting upon the tragedy that took place one afternoon in 1997.
A few years after the peace treaty was signed, there was a tragedy here that we should not forget, where 7 girls were shot while they were visiting the peace island and killed by a Jordanian soldier who was angry about the peace treaty, but was also disturbed mentally.
This tragic event, which affected 7 Israeli families, could have jeopardized everything if King Hussein of Jordan had not immediately reacted.
I don't know if you remember, King Hussein came to visit in Israel. It was a very moving and very touching action of him to come and visit every family of girls that was killed, bend on his knees and ask for and apologize before them.
Although the hope of Middle Eastern peace has grown distant since then, Israel and Jordan have continued discussions in the interest of the Jordan Valley.
Our dream is to see this valley become the valley of peace.
The sacred Jordan River may separate the two countries on paper, but it brings them together when it is a question of protecting this shared heritage, threatened by pollution and intensive use.
Jordan River on the last few decades become a very sad river. As you see, it hardly flows, not much water. Of course, the reason is that we use the water here for other uses, we and our neighbors.
Today, it is dangerous to swim in the Jordan River due to the used wastewater dumped in it by industries in Israel, Syria, and Jordan, when they aren't diverting the river for their own private use. By cooperating to remedy these problems, ecologists came up with the idea of this peace park.
98% of the water been diverted. So our studies on the Jordan River led us to this magnificent, beautiful area where the Yarmouk River joined the Jordan River, where Israel and Jordan are partners in that particular ecosystem.
The economic future of both countries depends on improving the Jordan River. Israel dreams of drawing more religious tourists who want to get baptized in the river. And Jordan dreams of converting its militarized bank into a tourist hotspot for watching the 500 million migrating birds that pass through here each year.
It would be a paradise for the bird watchers from all over the world, not only the area. That can really provide over 200 jobs for people of the valley here. And we all know that the people over here, they are poor.
This enthusiasm is shared by elected officials on either side of the river, the president of the Jordan Valley region and the Jordan mayor, Muat Ben Jabal.
A touristic project such as this in the Bakura region would have numerous benefits for the future generations of the region. And it is a powerful asset for the entire region and the well-being of its inhabitants.
If there is a common interest, there will be cooperation. For the Jordanians and Israelis that live on either side of the Jordan, the river is the meeting point that makes cooperation between the two peoples possible.
Concretely speaking, so far today, nothing tangible has been done. But perhaps the obstacle stems from the regional context.
In order for the park to become a reality, the Israeli and Jordanian governments must find a middle ground. Circulation on either side of the border is possible, the infrastructure is there, everything exists.
Every proponent of the Jordan Park agrees on one point. The harmony they enjoy on a local level won't be able to move forward until the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is resolved on a national level. But when that day comes, there is no reason to believe that Israel won't be connected to its Arab neighbors by a genuine peace park, like a bridge where trains will start running once more.
The Peace Park, which we call also the Jordan River Peace Park, it's really a dream, but it's an achievable dream.
It's not an unreachable dream. We just need some goodwill.
The park will open perspectives for cooperation and bring the peoples together. It will be big and symbolic, proof of the evolving pacifism in the region.
There has always been a sort of visionary avant-garde. Dreams have come true. I draw my optimism from history. That's what gives me the strength to believe that it's possible.
Nature can't do the work of men. We must first silence the weapons before building peace parks. But dreaming of it creates concrete ties that point the way to the future, as long as we keep our eyes on the horizon.
Any peace process requires leadership. You can make the economic case, you can make the ecological case, but what it requires is investment of political capital and leadership on both sides of the border to say, we are willing to stand up for this because we do see value in this in the long run, and short-term political interests can be put aside.
In the world, conflicts must first be resolved through diplomacy if possible. But doing that takes a great deal of willpower, enormous patience, great humility, and a lot of hard work, because it is easier to make war than peace.
This is the modest road that peace parks point out for us, including in regions where the challenge may seem impossible. The wildest utopists dream of a peace park here on this border between South Korea and North Korea, one of the world's worst dictatorships. A lush strip of land with an exceptionally rich ecology that NGOs would like to see on the World Heritage List. Perhaps one day. But for the time being, only birds can cross the border, flying toward a future where the beauty of the world will bring people together in peace.